Hi guys, Aaron Dorr here, Director of the New York State Firearms Association. And as you guys are all aware, we're making a major push this legislative session in Albany on stand your ground law. The idea behind stand your ground law, as you know, is that if the force that you use is justifiable, and if you are legally allowed to be where you are when you use that force, and if you are not the initial aggressor, you would have no requirement to retreat, and you would be immune from prosecution for taking defensive action. This is the idea that we already have in 36 states across the country. That includes blue states, California, Illinois, Oregon, all those states, and many, many, many more. And that is our big push here for New York. And again, as you've probably heard in our previous videos, this is essential that as gun owners, we stop only playing on defense and begin to go on offense and begin to push back and push for pro-gun legislation like this, because it allows us to go after people who are blocking this bill at election time. And with the elections coming up later on this year, with President Trump on top of the ballot, and with multiple legislators in the Senate in particular, who are occupying seats that they won in 2018, that President Trump carried in 2016, this is our time to push back as hard as we can and go on offense when it comes to our gun rights. So that's kind of what this bill does in a nutshell, and why it's so important you guys are involved in that fight. And don't forget to send your email to your assemblyman and senator beneath this video when we're done, urging him or her to co-sponsor this bill. But people are asking a lot of questions about the actual nuts and bolts. How does the immunity work? How does it work where we're protected if we use force in a public place? So we're going to break down the exact details of what this bill does. And we know about this because we wrote the bill. Prior to my work here with the New York State Firearms Association, I've helped out at length in my home state of Iowa with Iowa gun owners, where we drafted stand your ground legislation, which later on became law in Iowa in 2017. In 2016, we worked alongside of and led the charge for our sister organization, the Missouri Firearms Coalition, and passed stand your ground law and constitutional carry in Missouri in 2016. And if that wasn't enough work on this particular part of the gun rights battle, we wrote the bill and passed stand your ground law in Wyoming, in Cheyenne, Wyoming in 2018. So having been involved in these fights for a long time, we've incorporated all the best parts of those bills into the bill we have filed right now here in New York by Senator Rob Ortt and David DiPietro in the Assembly. And so what this bill would specifically do, there's three separate parts in this bill that we've laid out to give you protection on the criminal side after using defensive force. Because what happens in most situations right now, and it depends on what county you're in, depends on what part of the state you're in, what the mood of the courts is in the county that you're using defensive force in. But what happens in many cases is the cops arrive, you have your firearm, hopefully it's holstered when they arrive. You want to do that if you possibly can. You have the firearm, there's someone laying over there dead or wounded, or that person ran away and they found him down the road. But they arrive, and what oftentimes happens is he has the gun, that person has the gunshot in him, we have to arrest somebody. That's the idea. In many cases, they always default to arresting the guy who has the gun, the guy that fired the shots. It's happened so much that even talking to pro-gun lawmakers in Albany, they're kind of like, well, isn't that how it's supposed to happen? And I always have to laugh and say, if you didn't do anything wrong, you shouldn't be arrested. That's kind of like that whole American idea, right? Innocent until proven guilty. And just because somebody used force doesn't mean he did anything wrong. And so our bill is going to address right off the bat the idea of arresting somebody just because the courts are going to sort this out. That's ridiculous. So on page 2 of the bill, this is going to be on, lines 43 through 46. It says, I'll read it to you verbatim. It says as follows: no person shall be arrested pursuant to this section for a use of force unless the police officers believe that there is probable cause to find that the use of force was not justifiable under Article 35 of the penal law. In other words, if they have reason to believe and evidence and probable cause you broke the law, they're going to arrest you. They should. That's their job. But the contrary is also true, right? If there's no evidence you did anything wrong, the way this reads, they shall not make an arrest. You shall not be arrested unless there's probable cause that the force you used wasn't justifiable. Nobody's trying to write a bill that allows people to, quote, get away with murder. We're going to hear that forever from gun grabbers, from our crazy Governor Cuomo, from all these socialists who run the program right now in Albany. We're going to hear that for forever. But this bill would not do that. If your force was not justifiable, of course you can be arrested. You should be arrested. We should all be arrested. But that's not what we're talking about. It says if there's no probable cause you broke the law, you shall not be arrested. That's the first way we're going to protect you as gun owners. Secondly, then, this bill would grant criminal immunity protections to you if the force you used was justifiable. It says right here on line 25 of page 2, a person who is justified in threatening or using physical force against another person in defense of himself, herself, another person, or property pursuant to this section is immune from criminal liability for any damages incurred by the aggressor pursuant to the application of reasonable physical force. So again, if it's justifiable, right? If it's reasonable and you have to use force, you're immune from prosecution. Now, if you're a lawyer, and I'm not one, I don't even play one on TV, you're asking yourself, well, how can they conduct an investigation if they're immune if they can't arrest you? Well, no one says there can't be an investigation. Of course there's going to be an investigation. Someone was shot. Of course there's going to be an investigation. And in some cases, they can detain the gun owner for 24 hours as part of that investigation. That's not being challenged here. What we're saying here is that that person cannot be arrested just because. It does away with the idea of being arrested and, quote, letting the courts sort this out. That's not what our American Constitution is all about. As an innocent person, we shouldn't be arrested just because. We shouldn't be arrested just because there's somebody laying there who's been shot, not if we were acting in self-defense. So, of course, the authorities can investigate. They should, of course, always investigate. And they can question you. And again, in many cases, they can detain you for up to 24 hours. Again, it's more of a county by county thing. It depends on what county you're in. But if there is no actual probable cause that the force that you used was not appropriate, you would be immune from criminal prosecution. That's number 2 in this bill. Now, it goes on, though, because we all know in many cases there's going to be a prosecutor who says, I don't care what the law says, I'm going to prosecute him anyway. That especially is the case in the metro areas across the state. That's the case downstate. We all know how this works in real life. And that's why we're going to also present a pretrial hearing in this legislation to allow you to go to court and have the case dismissed in advance before you go through the misery of a lengthy criminal trial, before you go through the expense, financial, emotional, otherwise, of a lengthy criminal trial. And so it says right here, this is the third way we're going to deal with this in practicality. Upon arraignment, if a defendant offers the defense of justification to any allegation involving the use of physical force, including deadly physical force, the court shall dismiss the charges against the person unless the court can determine by a clear and convincing standard that the use of such force was not reasonable. So it's very clear right off the bat. If the force you used was reasonable, you shall have these charges dismissed. It shall be done that way. If there's evidence against you that is beyond a clear and convincing statute or status level, then sure, the case is going to proceed. But if the state cannot prove, even by a clear and convincing standard, which is a pretty low threshold compared to a probable cause, compared to reasonable doubt, if they can't prove by at least a clear and convincing threshold that there's actually a case here against you, the court shall dismiss these charges. And these are the three ways that we're going to protect gun owners who are forced to use defensive force to protect themselves against a violent criminal. The law should never enable the criminals, but we all know right now in New York, because we don't have stand your ground law, we don't even have a functional castle doctrine law right now, and because of last year's criminal bail reform, absolute insanity, nonsense, the criminals always have the upper hand. And they know that. That's why they're getting more and more brazen, more and more bold. They know they can't be held. They don't have to post any bail. They can be processed and released for almost anything right now, including many, many violent crimes. And so stand your ground law is the battle that we have to be engaged in right now, to go on offense, to remain on offense, because you shouldn't have your life ruined a second time because some piece of trash tried to murder you, kidnap you, rape you, attack you, what have you. The law should protect gun owners. And if the law doesn't, then we, as gun owners at election time, have the ability then to hold those politicians accountable who will stand up and fight for criminals, but won't do that for you and I. That's what this fight is all about, guys. So send off your email to your politicians immediately. Tell them to co-sponsor the bill. The link for that is beneath this video. Join our fight. Become a member of the New York State Firearms Association. That link is also beneath this video. And if you're not receiving our email alerts, guys, you're missing out. All of our best information comes out by email. That can't be shadow banned, right, by Facebook. So sign up for our email alerts at NYSFAupdates.com. A lot more to come, guys. Be involved in this fight. Stay tuned. Much more to come. We'll keep you informed.